Back in 1993, Toyota introduced a two-door version of their most popular car, the Camry, to compete with the then-popular sporty but also family-friendly coupe market. That car eventually became the Solara, which also was offered as a convertible. But its Camry roots and the public shift from sporty two-door cars killed it for good in 2008. This is the story of the Toyota Solara. This is my old car. After first launching in the US in 1983, the Camry sales rose to almost 300,000 annually by 1993. But an increase in consumer interest with more sporty-oriented but still practical two-door coupes made Toyota realize that a coupe version of their most popular car could bring in even more sales. Its competitors at the time in the mid-sized two-door car market were other Japanese cars, such as the Honda Accord, German cars such as the BMW 3 Series, and American cars like the Ford Thunderbird, Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme, and Pontiac Grand Am. But the Camry Coupe never came close to the sales of the Camry sedan, which led Toyota to drop the Camry Coupe by 1996. But the previous year, development began on its replacement, the Toyota Solara. Although the styling was changed enough to make it no longer look just like a Camry, it was still based on the same mechanical platform as the Camry and built in the same factory. Oddly enough, it was still often marketed as the Camry Solara, which had continued to be called through its entire 10-year run. As was the case with the other coupe models noted earlier, the idea with the Solara was to be a bit larger than the popular economical coupes at the time, such as the Ford Escort, GM's Cavalier and Sunbird, and the Honda Civic, but also have more practicality than the typical sports car, such as the Ford Mustang or Chevy Camaro. But trying to fall somewhere in the middle maybe gave it somewhat of an identity crisis that it never fully recovered from. Engines offered in the first Solaras were essentially the same as what was in the Camry at the time, a 2.2-liter four-cylinder making 135 horsepower, or a 3-liter V6 making 200 horsepower. Both were offered with either 5-speed manual or 4-speed automatic transmissions. The Solara's relatively small size made for a 0 to 60 time of just over 7 seconds for the V6, which for the mid-90s was a very respectable number. It also offered a sports package that retuned the suspension and offered features that would be most likely standard in a sports car today, such as powered leather seats and a rear spoiler. This upgrade also provided 16-inch wheels instead of 15, which nowadays seems laughable, but 15-inch wheels were much more common back then. After only offering the coupe body style for 1998 and 1999, Toyota introduced a convertible Solara starting in 2000. However, like so many convertibles made back then, they were originally built as coupes and then later converted to convertibles via American Sunroof Company, or ASC. ASC provided drop-top conversions for many cars back then, some of which I mentioned in my previous episodes, such as the Chevy Cavalier and the Toyota Celica. However, unlike some of those other convertibles, the Solara conversion did not include structural improvements. The removal of the car's roof results in a serious loss in structural rigidity. You simply can't cut off the top and expect the car to be as stiff and stable as it once was. Other ASC converted cars typically had some form of extra bracing added into the floor and sides of the car to improve structural rigidity. But at the time, Toyota claimed that the Solara's design was such that any additional structural improvements were not needed. The end result, however, were cars that many owners complained were just too wiggly and therefore hurt their sporty intentions. But its non-sporty characteristics actually put it in direct competition with one of the most popular drop-tops of the 90s, the Chrysler Sebring. The Sebring also tried to be a sporty convertible, but ultimately was favored by the retiree crowd and became a favorite for rental car fleets in warm weather travel destinations. The Sebring outlived the Solara by several years, most likely because of those fleet sales. After a small refresh in 2001, bigger changes were being planned for the Solara as a result of the Camry sedan being redesigned for 2002. Introduced in 2003 as a 2004 model, the second generation Solara was larger and much more jelly-bean and bulbous in size and shape, a trend that was more popular in the 90s but the Solara took some time to catch up to. Although the four-cylinder engine carried over from the previous generation, the V6 was upgraded to a 3.3-liter rated at 225 horsepower, but the new generation platform was heavier and therefore really needed that extra horsepower to maintain the power it had before. The coupe body style was at first the only option upon the second generation's release, but by February 2004, the convertible was reintroduced. Unlike the previous convertible that was a converted coupe, the second gen was built as a convertible at the same factory alongside the coupe. Toyota pushed this in its press release to help convince potential buyers that all the rigidity issues that plagued the last version were now history. It was an improvement, but the previous benchmark was very low, so it really could only get better being designed as a convertible from the start. One key attempt to improve the structural rigidity was to integrate roll bars into the rear seat headrests, which resulted in the convertible's rear seats being fixed in place and could not fold down, whereas the seats did fold down in the coupe to provide access into the trunk. Despite this, the convertible's trunk space was not drastically smaller than the coupe, and the amount of trunk space did not change as a result of the top being up or down, as is the case in some convertibles. Instead, the space allocated for the stowed top always remained fixed. Toyota was a bit ahead of their time by even offering the roll bars, considering its biggest competitor, the Chrysler Sebring, offered zero rollover protection. For the few remaining convertibles on the market today, they are now required to have some form of rollover protection, so the more luxury-oriented models typically offer roll bars that deploy from behind the rear seats when the car's computer detects that a rollover is imminent. These roll bars use similar technology to airbags in that explosives are used to push the roll bars up in a fraction of a second. While the coupe still offered either the 4 or 6-cylinder engine and either the 5-speed manual or 4-speed automatic, the convertible was limited to just the V6 with an automatic. This decision adds some confusion as to what Toyota was considering the target market may be. By only offering the convertible with the V6, then it sounds like they were catering to the more sporty-oriented car buyer, but eliminating the manual transmission, by definition, could turn away some of those same buyers. The second gen had a slight refresh done in 2006 for the 2007 model year. Although most would just notice a change in the headlamp and tail lamp designs, another important change was holes added in the center of the rear seat headrest. The hole was the area of the headrest not containing the roll bar. This was clearly an attempt to provide more visibility in the rear, as the headrest blocked at least half of the top's rear window. Despite these changes, sales continued to slip to around only 20,000 sold for the model year 2008. The coupe model was losing the most sales, so it was discontinued in 2008, although convertibles continued for the 2009 model year. However, the convertible production ended by December 2008. Other convertibles, such as the Pontiac Solstice and Saturn Sky, died soon after, but the Chrysler Sebring instead went through a redesign where it continued to offer convertible in either soft top or a retractable hardtop. Chrysler joined the retractable hardtop fad, which took off in the mid-2000s, that also included the BMW 3 Series and the Volvo C70. But the sales of the Solara simply couldn't justify a new model, least of all with a retractable hardtop. Ironically, the retractable hardtop fad has since nearly disappeared once buyers realized how impractical they can be with little to no trunk space when the top is stowed. I originally owned a 2004 Solara convertible, one of the first available in the Detroit area when they launched in the US in early 2004. And yes, of course, everyone asked if the car helped me manage my midlife crisis, which was a bit of a stretch since I was only 36 years old when I bought it. My two boys loved the car and ran down to the end of the street to meet me on the day I drove it home. But honestly, the main reason I wanted a convertible, strangely enough, was to help cool off the car after it had been sitting in the hot summer sun while I was at work all day. I didn't like using the AC since I still had the mindset from my older cars, having such a performance hit and poor fuel economy when the AC was on. So I wanted a way to cool off the car quickly. But it also had to be roomy for the kids, and the back seat was huge compared to any other convertible, including the Sebring, and the top sealed up very well in the winter. However, visibility with the top up was horrible, and we didn't have backup cameras back in those days. But it still worked trouble-free for the 6 years that I owned it, until I too finally joined the SUV craze. Thanks for watching. This is the last episode I will do about cars that I once owned, and going forward I will discuss other cars of the 80s to mid-2000s that you rarely see today. If you once had one that you'd like me to feature in a future episode, leave a reply in the comments, or contact me at the email address shown here. See you next time.